Medical kidnapping is becoming increasingly common in blue states. And today, my friends Bryce and LaToya Richards are joining me to share their story of what happened when their daughter was just 4 months old in Washington state, and to give you information and tools so that you can protect your children and your family. Well, welcome, Bryce and LaToya. I so appreciate you guys taking the time to share your family's story. This is so important, and really just raising awareness of what is going on in Washington state and in a lot of the blue states, and kind of starting to even filter out to the red states. So just to give everybody a little bit of backstory, I think the situations with our families happened around the same time in 2021. And Bryce and I were connected by former state representative in Washington, Brad Clippert, who is trying to help us kind of navigate through similar but very different situations. And so we've stayed connected. Bryce and LaToya have since moved out of Washington to the free state of Texas. And probably knows that I have also moved out to the free state of Florida. So we all have this perspective of what it's like living in a blue state that really believes that the government has the authority over your children. And what happened with your daughter as a baby is really terrifying. So I want to let you guys start kind of at the beginning and just share your story. We're going to do kind of the condensed version, and I'll link. I know you guys did an interview with Todd Herman, so I'll link that in the description below if people want to get more into the details of the story. But walk us through how did this start? Just kind of walk us through what happened with Washington state when your daughter was 4 months old.
Right. Start on the day, I guess.
So it all started with a day that I was at home. Bryce was at work, and I had my daughter on the changing table, and I had turned to kind of reach to go ahead and grab like diapers or wipes or something I needed. And in doing so, she had fallen off the changing table. All I heard was kind of a thud. And so when I turned back around and looked at her, I mean, she was kind of face down on the carpet in her bedroom. And I picked her up right away. I mean, she cried instantly. And I mean, I myself am a physician assistant. So I mean, obviously did everything that I could in regards to kind of just a once over to make sure she was okay in terms of any sort of like injury and things like that. And everything seemed to be fine at that point. We didn't have any issues or concerns. And so kind of went about our day, went to put her down for bedtime, and she didn't want to nurse, which was a little bit unusual because she always was never a problem child in regards to like nursing at all. And so when she didn't nurse, I was a little bit concerned, and I had told Bryce, and we ended up kind of just looking over her again, and I did notice that she had kind of a small little like contusion in the bottom of her mouth, and I was like, well, maybe that's why, like that makes sense, like she wouldn't want to nurse. But even being a PA, your mother instinct still kicks in. I was still worried, and so I kind of wanted just like some reassurance and kind of a second opinion that like everything was fine. And so Bryce and I kind of talked about it, and we decided that we would take her to Seattle Children's to just get that second opinion, if you will. And so we took her into the emergency room. And
can I ask you a quick question? Sorry to interrupt you, but did you have, in making that decisions, did you have any reservations? Like if we take her to the doctor, you know, they might look at this with a different lens. Were there any reservations, or just?
Not at that point, no.
Okay.
Not when we were first talking about it and thinking about it, because I mean, I normally have some trust in my industry,
Right.
but that definitely changed a lot since this instance, and knowing a lot more than I know now. So not at first, no.
Okay.
When we took her in, I mean, I didn't expect anything to come of it other than just to have a conversation with another provider. And so we took her in, and I mean, it was fairly late at that point in the evening.
10, 11 o'clock.
Obviously, she hadn't gone to sleep yet, so she was in there, and I mean, we were waiting for the provider to come in, and the nurses had come in, like done her vitals. Everything was stable. She was normal. Like, I mean, a little bit fussy when they had taken off her clothes because it was like cold, and so
and lights everywhere past your bedtime. Yeah. Like, what 4-month-old wouldn't get fussy? And
yeah,
I mean, hitting on that point inevitably gets to like the twisting of the stories that they will do. They will pick particular information, highlight it, exacerbate it. And obviously one of the things was the child was inconsolable. And it was just, no, you were ripping her clothes off to check her to make sure she was good. And of course, what 4-month-old isn't going to cry? Like, it would be weird if she wasn't crying.
Right.
They hung on to that line and took that through, through the rest of the thing. And I think once they took the clothes off, once we kind of told them what everything was going on, even the nurses and the doctor that came in were like, don't worry, you're good parents. Like, I can't tell you how many times kids come in falling off the changing table. Like this happens all the time. So it's kind of even reassuring us, like, don't worry about it. It's not that big a deal. So then we brought up like the whole reason it kind of came in was she wasn't nursing. And so we found something underneath her tongue. Can you take a look at it, see what, how bad it is? If that's a thought process. And while they were doing that, they looked, and they were gone for a better part of a half hour, 45 minutes. During this time, he takes Harper and breastfeeds her. She was latching, she was eating. We're like, I think we got all the information we need. Blood pressure's good, O2's good, heart rate's good, all the vitals that we couldn't check at the house because we didn't have those instruments for an infant. Everything was checked off. And then my spider senses kind of start to go off where it's like, what's going on? Like, what? Like, why is this taking forever? Then they
left you in the room alone with your daughter, and they're gone for like 30 minutes, and you're like, where'd they go? What's going on?
Yep. And obviously we found out that they went and took the information to what they call their scan team and came back in and go, we want to do CT scan, full body x-rays, and blood work. Not telling us kind of what was going on. And I'm like, no, we're good. We've got everything. Like, explain to me why you think this child is bleeding internally or in the brain where you need to do a CT scan. Like, she went into the medical stuff. She's not exhibiting this makes no sense. You did a body check with the arms where they were checking her arms. No issue, no screaming, no crying associated with particular touching, no other bruising on the body. Like, there was nothing that would insinuate that she would need any of these tests done. So we said, no, we don't want exposure to the radiation. Thanks, but we'd like to leave. And so they left. Another 30 minutes go by. I'm like, get Harper in the seat, get prepped. I know it's going to come. They come in. They go, we're going to take the kid and we're going to go do this. I'm like, no, you're not.
No, they said that they were going to call security if we decided that we were going to leave because they had already consulted and decided, obviously, that they had their plan. But yeah.
So we got in. I said, consider us AMA, leaving against medical advice, and you can send me the bill in the mail, and that's it. And then we walked out. They didn't try to stop us. They kind of got in our way a little bit, but not to the point of where there was any type of physical altercation or the rest of it, which I was a little bit surprised about. I thought they would put up a little bit bigger of a fight, but it was nice. It was, we went out, went home, put her down at the house. Not 45 minutes later, I got 3 cops outside my door. I got cameras outside my house. So before they even come up to the front door, I go outside and meet them in the driveway. I already know what's going on. I have my recorder. And this is, another paramount thing. The second you're in this situation or any type of situation with law enforcement, CPS, agencies, the rest of it, you record everything. You enunciate it that you're recording if you're in a 2-party state. If you're in like Texas, thankfully it's only a 1-party state, so I can record anything I want, whenever I want.
So if someone is in Washington, do they have to tell the cops that they're recording, or the social worker or whoever?
Yeah, unless if they have body cams on and it's apparent that they're supposed to be recording, then you don't have to. You're in a public setting and the rest of it. But I just wanted to make sure it was all crystal clear that this was being recorded. So
then even before before that, we had already called Seattle Children's to kind of file a complaint about kind of the situation that happened. So we had already done that and put that information out there. This is before the cops had even shown up, but
yeah, I forgot about that.
yeah.
Conversation. Obviously, they're inquisitive and they're like, "Hey, we got a call that there's she's got a brain bleed," and I'm like, "Well, there's not a brain bleed. Let's stop that one. She's got a head injury," and I'm like, "Nope, no head injury. This is all just under the tongue, a very small bruise." And she's upstairs, she's sleeping. I'm like, "You're not coming into the house." And they're like, "Well, we actually use circumstances." And this is again knowing kind of law enforcement, the rest of it. I'm like, "Well, good luck explaining that one in court because there's no life, fire, threat, safety associated with what's going on. So if you enter my house without a warrant, like, we'll take criminal action against you." But happy to talk and have a dialogue associated with what's going on. They got the information. They talked to her as a physician and basically said, "We're good. We don't deem this as a threat anymore. We de-escalated it, had a conversation." And they left, telling us that expect to knock on your door from a social worker. Obviously, the next day, a social worker came. We know our rights. We didn't answer the door. We don't have. We're not obligated to answer doors. We're not obligated to be home at the random times that they want to show up associated with it. So this continued for a couple of days. They kept knocking on the door, knocking on the door, knocking on the door. They left their business cards and the rest of it. And then finally got annoying. And we called an attorney case, and she says, "Post on your door that if you want to have forms of communication, have it go through me." So we put it up on the door, cease and desist all forms of communication at this point, and contact my attorney. Well, a detective shows up to the house. He sees the note, reads it, I have a reader that's reading, and still proceeds to not, even though I have exercised my constitutional right to not to or interview associated with the case, formulate all questions through my attorney. He circumvents that. And again, we can't do that. But it was really at that point that we started to exercise our right as parents, not going through what I guess they expected their process to be. That things escalated, I would say, very quickly. And it had been maybe, what do you think? Little more than a week.
So all of this has occurred in the course of 1 week's time.
Yeah, so you had the initial incident, the cops coming out that night, 4 to 5 days of CPS social workers coming out, and then finally the detective comes out, sees the note, and then as soon as he takes a picture of it, actually calls our attorney after he leaves, and she just says, "Yeah, formulate all questions and issues and problems, through me, and I'll funnel it to my client." At that point, they take it to the judge, and we've kind of talked about this. DCYF, which is the CPS of Washington, has a 17-point list. Basically, if you check the box of any one or two of these items, they can deem it a threat, and that's
Is that this?
That is that. And now we didn't know about this until later on through the process, but then they started to rattle these things off, and they go, as soon as we find one of these threats, we can take the child. And so they formulated a narrative, sent it to the judge, and the judge signed it. I mean, it's pithy. It talks about head injuries. So they knew that they needed to hit certain points in this letter to the judge. Head injury was one. Two is
We weren't compliant or something.
Parents are not compliant with the process. And I mean, really, that's deemed a threat. Like, at the end of the day, what person wants to all of a sudden just be compliant with the process that they have no idea about? Like, that's why we got an attorney. Like, we thought we could exercise our constitutional rights of getting an attorney to do the process, but clearly they didn't like that.
This is all for what they call pickup orders. So pretty much orders from the judge to say you have the right to go take the child away.
Yep. So now it was like a day or two after they got that order. And there's the image of this that I sent over where the 2 social workers and 3 cops.
Is that the text?
No, there should be I think it's a picture of the cop shining his flashlight. Oh, it's in the body of the email. And he's shining his flashlight into our house, which is
Yeah, that was like
not that one. That's the one when they flanked my house. Not that one. And so the cops shining his flashlight, again, Fourth Amendment violation, because at that point he doesn't have a warrant to look into my house. And so he's violating my Fourth Amendment. And another cop actually enters my backyard to flashlight our house from the backside. Again, entering a locked gate, Fourth Amendment violation without a warrant. And we were actually inside the house at this time. And I'm on the phone with our attorney. And she goes, well, they have a pickup order. She goes, but I don't know where you're at. And I was like, yep. And I go, they don't have a warrant to come to the house, do they? They're like, she goes, nope. So at this point, all the lights have been turned off, looked like the house is vacated. My wife, and I mean, you talk about from an emotional standpoint, my adrenaline's running to fight. Her adrenaline running to kind of the emotions of flight, and she's upstairs in our master bedroom, like holding our daughter, just rocking back and forth, uncontrollable, like from a crime scene. While I'm trying to entertain what potentially may happen next. And the only comment I'll leave onto this one is just Washington State is a castle law, and without a warrant, I'm allowed to defend my castle. I'll kind of leave it at what the thought process was kind of at that point. So thankfully, they did not enter the house or breach the house.
Yeah.
So we have that at least. They leave and immediately knew this was beyond escalated at this point, and it was going to get worse. And this went from 0 to 60 in the matter, I think it was 10 to 12 days, like very fast.
Wow. You must have been terrified, just terrified.
Yeah, it was, I still get obviously emotional thinking about it, but yeah, definitely terrifying thinking someone's going to come to your child and feeling like you don't really have any control in the situation at the moment and trying to figure out what to do very quickly. But.
Yeah.
So I made a phone call to my parents and said, I don't want to know. I don't know what's going to happen. I go, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take her up to a location up in Monroe, which is where one of her friends lives. And you guys decide how you're going to pick her up, where you're going to take her. And I go, the only thing you're going to do is you just need to ditch your phone. And so a lot of this will come into some of the deposition conversations with the attorneys and cops later. But so that next day, we got not even next day. I think it was that night. We got our bug out bag. We got all the baby necessities that we needed and the rest of it. And boom, we're up in Monroe, Washington. A couple hours later, and I leave her at her friend's house. I come down. Again, we got 2 dogs. I'm gonna make sure the dogs are good, and I'm gonna man the house. I'm gonna do what needs to be done there. And at that point, I know what happens technically after this point because now, we've been exonerated of everything and I've been briefed on everything. But at that point, I had no idea. I was like, look, plausible liability, I don't want to know. If you need to get in contact with me, you will know when the case is over with. And then we can get in contact. Do not call me. Do not text me. Do not email me. I don't know what type of surveillance they're going to have. And obviously, lo and behold, they were pinging our phones. They were getting. They went to the U.S. Marshals to try to get what they're called like license checks. Like when you're traveling on the interstate, they're license readers. Like they were trying to figure out everywhere we were. And so she leaves for 10 days off the grid in a different state. And we will not give the location of that, but it's just a different state. And at that point, the cops escalated their searches and seizures of our data, of our information, the rest of it. And then then you have that image after where the 7 officers, and this is about 3 or 4 days later, they obtained a warrant to come into our house in order to take Harper. And that's that image.
So this is when they're arriving at your house with the warrant to come get your daughter?
Yeah, you'll see the front image there of Detective Hillman, and he's got one of the battering rams, ramrods, fully prepped to breach the house at that point. And mind you, this is they had gotten the pickup order. They're legally required within 72 hours after obtaining a pickup order to have what's called, I think it's like a family,
some sort of family meeting, or
yeah, basically like insinuating this is what we're going to do with your kid and blah blah blah. But they didn't have it. And so they're like, this is a very weird situation. Usually we have the child, not entirely sure what to do here. And I go, just as FYI, because it's on a Zoom call, because it's right in the heart of COVID when everybody's afraid to in front of each other. And I was like, okay, just an FYI, this conversation is being recorded. No, we're not recording this. And I'm like, oh, yes, we are. And so they took 15, 20 minutes to so on, and they're like, no, we don't consent to recording. I'm like, that's fine. It's going to be recorded. You guys can choose to do your process or not. And they move forward with it. And
our attorney is on the line with him.
Okay.
Like, again, document everything, record everything. Even if they say I don't consent to be recorded, you record it. Audio, video, anything that you can, because they will lie. And after I got the FOIA request of all the documentation, they lie about everything, or as they call it, the exculpatory evidence. They will specifically leave particular types of evidence that would exonerate you out. And it was just astonishing that their main objective, and you'll see it in the emails, is get that kid. They could care less about, hey, maybe we should check to find out if his parents are around, and the kid can stay with the parents while we conduct interviews. Or let's take all the exhibits. Like, we sent in almost 20 exhibits of a second opinion, because we went down to Tri-Cities, where my parents are, and got a second opinion, actually 3 opinions. Mm-hmm. We got a second opinion from a physician at Cadillac, and another one from a naturopath, which, by the way, CPS does not think naturopaths are real doctors. They stated that for the record. They go, we don't think naturopaths are real doctors. At least the judge goes, well, they're recognized in the state of Washington as real doctors, so I have to take what they say. But he just didn't want to take that evidence that a naturopath viewed her and was like, everything's perfectly fine. And Cadillac even wrote a document that's the injuries are consistent with the mechanism of the fall. Like, you can absolutely get a contusion underneath the tongue or in the mouth by landing on your face on the ground. And I want to let everybody know it was padded carpet on a rug. It wasn't like a hardwood floor. So she had some softness to do it. And at that point, she's been swaddled for 4 months. Maybe the Maro reflex was happening. Let's set it right. All right, reflex happened or not. And she very well could have had fingers in her mouth at that time as well, too.
Sure.
It was, we don't know. They'll paint this picture of, your horrible parents, and we just want to get the kid. So, I mean, from there, she's underground. They're flanking the house. They come in the house. They tackle me. In my opinion, pretty excessively.
Is it you being tackled in this picture?
Yep, that's Detective Blakeman with obviously, and you can see the image of the individual who's just coming in and breaching the door there. His hand is on his gun. His gun was out the entire time they were searching my house. Even though their entire threat assessment of me was, don't worry about it, they're fine. The rest of it's a very low threat assessment. But your gun's out with a 4-year-old or a 4-month-old. Like, really? And so I'm getting tackled. This is 1 hour before we're supposed to be having our sit down with the judge for the parental hearing. And I'm I'm in the other room in the office with my wife on a Zoom call. I don't know where she is. I just know she's on a Zoom call with our attorney going over how we're going to prep, what the questions are going to look like, so on and so forth. And we were prepping. And then all of a sudden, ding dong. And they had pinged at that point, I figured out they had pinged our phones and found out that I was at the house the entire time. And they did not like that. So they showed up and took me, booked me.
But also another issue during that very moment is there was however many, like 4 or 5 officers in the house at that time. So he did get tackled, but one of the other officers actually took our camera that we had in our living room, went in and went around to actually like unplug the camera so that nothing could be recorded.
Yeah, so I feel, and a lot of attorneys and civil justice attorneys feel as though your ability to record peace officers, call them peace officers, I suppose, but to make sure that they're doing the right thing is a legally protected constitutional right. And so I have cameras outside. Obviously, you got the image of them coming into the home. I got a ring camera that shows everything that they were at their door. And at this point, I posted a camera that was inside our house in my private property, pointed at the door, recorded the whole thing. At the time that Detective Hillman spots this camera, he goes over to it. He looks around like he knows he's not doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Puts the camera down and actually goes around and unplugs it. Through this process, I was having a conversation with a detective buddy of mine, and he was just appalled. He's appalled. He's like, never in my life would I think to remove some security system. Like, that's there to protect them. Like, it looks like you're doing something nefarious.
Yes.
And the warrants, like he saw the warrants. He's like, these are 1 paragraph warrants with very little nexus written into them or description of what's going on. And these judges are signing off to remove a physical person from a family. He goes, my warrants have to be like 7, 8, 9, 10 pages long, very specific, and even specific to the point of where it is I'm going, what is that I'm doing, what I'm going to look in, what I'm not going to look in. And they got free reign in the house and the rest of it on a paragraph. But this goes to the big issue is these are agencies. Mm-hmm. And 17-point threat factor is not law. It's not created by either the judicial system or the legislative branch. Not the judicial system can create legislation, but they interpret it. And they have given such broad power through the legislative branch that they get to create their own rules, regulations, and policies. They get to interpret, they get to enact on them, and use peace officers at their bullying discretion to enforce it. And they have their own judicial system. The family judicial system is not under the same system as civil and criminal proceedings. It's its own system. And you start to piece this together and you see it all at the end, and then you get the FOIA requests, and then you get the text message that's sent over of CPS interacting with law enforcement, that they're physically laughing at us because we want to exercise our constitutional rights and don't even think to read that, oh, we could get back within 30 days. There hasn't been a case that children get back to their family within 30 days. It's years. And that's exactly why we did what we did at the time that we did it. We knew if she ever got into foster custody or CPS custody, that it would take years for us to get her back.
Yeah. And so this is just infuriating, this text exchange here that you got through a FOIA. They need to produce the child. None of this had to happen this way. And they're laughing, but it's their constitutional right. LOL. I mean, this is like, you assume they do this, but to actually see it right there is just infuriating. And like, it's probably some activist social workers that probably have very different beliefs than we all do.
Yeah, a 22-year-old with no kids of her own, Like, I mean, as it is
in our house. So we end up through the whole process. The judge does make us end up taking Harper back into the hospital.
well,
She ended up having to go through all those exams that they wanted to do initially, so we weren't able to kind of get around that. And then they made us.
I'll snip real quick. Basically, got arrested. They released me because they went through a full process of asking me questions. I knew where she was, didn't know. The judge determines that I'm not inhibiting their investigation. Then we're able to go back into court. We went 3 days in court. Inevitably, the judge said, look, I will remove the pickup order as long as you go get these tests done. And so we talked about it before we made a decision. So we got a sidebar in a breakout room in the Zoom meeting. And at that point, we go, look, how much further do we want to push this issue?
Yeah.
So we go, all right, come in, we'll do these things. My wife goes, I don't want a CT scan, an MRI. And this is, again, it's like, why would these parents want to do an MRI? Because one, they don't want the radiation. Two, an MRI gives better imaging than a CT scan. So it's like, we're allowing you to get a better image of our daughter, which we know is going to exonerate. Mind you, all of these tests, which they claim is for the head injuries, is done 1 day later. If she had a head injury, she would have bled out. She would have died. Like, why are we doing post imaging of a child for injuries that you think she sustained that would have killed her already 21 days later? Like, it makes no medical sense.
Right.
So yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, we ended up doing all the tests. Of course, everything comes back completely normal, as she kind of alluded to in that text message, because there was no issue to begin with. And then, I mean, they even there was lab work that they thought was off, which they don't necessarily know specifics as to why it could have been off, because there's a complete whole reason that you would have kind of some elevated labs, and they wanted to do further imaging, like CT scan, further imaging of her abdomen, look for like internal bleeding, which clearly was not going to be an issue. So they kept pushing and pushing, even though there was nothing there. They kept searching to try and find something. No, they had nothing. And I think that's all it literally was. They just they kept wanting to do something in hopes that they would find one single thing that they could, and obviously they didn't.
The lab that came back with an elevated liver enzyme, and
it can happen as a result of just breastfeeding.
And a cold, the common cold can, and
Right.
very in young children who are breastfeeding. And we bring this medical research to the doctor at that time, and she goes, but it's a liver laceration. And my wife is furious. She goes, if it was a liver laceration, she would be jaundiced. She would have these issues, and you would be presenting in other different ways. But of course, we're now trapped in the hospital, and I see the social worker, the officers outside. Basically, we decide to do something, like they're going to take her right there. And it was unnerving even being in there. They're manhandling her to X-ray machines, and she's screaming and crying and the rest of it. So it was a tough process, but praise God, she got through the MRI, which was, we were worried a 4-month-old going through an MRI, but she slept through the whole thing.
Wow.
The noise and everything. And it was just like, they got the image they needed. So we consented to the CT scan, just liberate us more, but Lord knows how much radiation that we were up with that day. 24 images of X-rays, 24 images to make sure that they could get an image of every bone and every single body. But it doesn't stop there. Everything was clear. She had clear health. We thought this thing was over. Nope. We had a letter in the mail. You are founded of abuse.
Of abuse?
Of abuse. Yep. And after all of this information, like how, what pretext do you have? This strips her of her license to be able to practice. So it's a huge issue. Not to mention, you're going to be considered, you put up on a registry of a child abuser at that point.
Right.
And so, all right, now we're gearing up again. We're going to have to fight this. And they were still trying to obtain dependents. They were still trying to come after her because they go, the mechanism in which they're saying that she got this bruise isn't consistent with what they're saying.
They were saying and claiming that she was forced fed,
right.
even though she had been exclusively breastfed her entire life. But they were saying that she was forced fed, and that's how she potentially ended up getting the injury.
And force feeding in the United States, I mean, like I said, we ran through research and the rest of it. It's such a, I mean, we're not talking like 1% of the population. It's like, it's hundreds of a percentage of the general population because this is a third world country kind of problem with force feeding, malnourishment. And then on top of that, they don't even ask the medical necessary questions. What is she eating? How is she eating? They're not asking these questions. They're just jumping to conclusions. I'm like, guys, she's exclusively breastfed. So they're in the laughing stock of the medical industry because we're going around, we're like, oh yes, this doctor at Seattle Children's thinks that my wife's got diamonds for nipples that's bruising our child's mouth. Like you're special kind of stupid.
Right.
So
wow.
So then that process continues for a few more months. Finally, they drop it, and that just came out of the blue. And then they dropped the dependency. They finally just let it go, and that was in August, almost 6 months after the process started. And then in November or December of that year, almost a year, we finally got a letter in the mail that said we're changing it from founded to unfounded because we couldn't appeal that founded decision until all the other charges were dropped, and then we went to appeal. And again, that's in some of the FOIA requests we have. I mean, they sit there and they go, and I get it. They want to make sure that they're long tight and they're not going to lose their case, but they're like, these parents are going to appeal this. These parents are going to find loopholes, make sure that this case is locked tight, figure out whatever type of evidence that you need to do in order to make sure that this thing sticks. And it's just, there's like,
is that the one?
Yep, there's a couple other ones too where there's some highlightations in there that basically just claim, we will do whatever we need to do to make sure we get this child. And in cases, they perjured themselves. They lied under oath because they kept flipping back between the narrative of it's a head injury, so then they could get the warrants. But then when we finally got in front of the judge, it's the confusion under the mouth, which they're claiming was indicative of force keeping. I'm like, pick one, guys. Like, which one are we defending against? One, and you can't increase the severity of something just so you can go and get warrants. Because, head injury, what judge isn't going to look at that and be like, this is pretty severe. That wasn't the reason. So
I want to point out this sentence about because we know how these parents are protective, I guess, and there's a likelihood of an appeal attempt. Quadruple check your notes for accuracy and that everything is dated and timed correctly. So they know that you guys are pushing back, that you're going to defend your family.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. And double check your notes, triple check your notes, because you don't do it on other cases where you don't think family members are going to fight back. So you can lie because these other families aren't like, I mean, I'm not going to like diminish the fact that this whole process.
There you are.
This is unreal. So we're interviewing with Todd Herman a year and a half ago, and we start talking about God, and all of a sudden, internet connection starts to get disrupted, and Todd pumps in. He's like, "This is the devil trying to get us not to be able to communicate."
Totally.
35 minutes of perfect connection through it, and then I bring up God, and now all of a sudden we got an internet connection disruption. Like, I mean, so many coincidences before it.
Coincidences.
Yeah. So exercise, like being able to sit there and say, do these things, I know my constitutional rights, blah, blah, blah. But then there were definitely instances where I didn't button things up the way that I needed to have buttoned them up. And they didn't ask the questions, or they didn't dive into particular things. Or, when she was on the run, like they're going into Walmart covering their faces and the rest of it. And then they got a phone and they're like, oh, we've been made. We have to get rid of the phones. And, kind of like you're doing all these things with trying to like protect yourself. But then you find out later on that God's hand was all over this the entire time. Like your little mess ups, they're not going to see them.
Right.
I'm going to protect you. And it was definitely a huge blessing, because we know other families at this point, they don't think it could ever happen to them. They think that just answering these questions, and that was the one big thing with you and me. I mean, I sat there and questioned it. Had we actually gone along with the process, what would have happened? Like, could have this been changed? Could it have been the 30 days that she's claiming in her text? And the answer is no. So,
right.
Day 3, they're already talking about taking the child.
They didn't want her to even go with any family members, nothing. Like they legit just wanted her in the state's hands. Like they had already deemed like they weren't the child to go with any family members, nor did they try and even access and get a hold of any family members, because the only parents that they got any sort of information or location on were his parents. But my parents live in the same state, and they tried to kind of look to find her.
And they only found my parents after she went on the run, because they go, I bet she's staying at my parents' house. And that's where it just comes back. And it's like, these people don't do their true due diligence. They claim that they don't want to disrupt families, take families away, and they're trying to keep them intact and the rest of it. It's all a fake facade. They're a bunch of people. Like, they just lie to give that public persona that they're trying to do this. But in the end, it wasn't until they wanted to find the child because she was because they were on the run, that they then went and did their database search of family members in the area.
So I know you both have family in Washington State, and it was, I know I've met your mom through this process too, Bryce, and your mom is just a sweet lady. But getting the help of your family, especially like your family's on the east side of the state, which people in Washington understand the difference between the east side of the mountains and the west side of the mountains. And so it's great that you had that support to be able to like take my wife, make sure she and our baby are safe, and don't tell me. So you have a really good support system for that. I'm curious, did you have because it sounds like you guys were both really intentional about how you went through this process. Did you know what to expect going into something like this? Had you like thought about whatever happens in a situation like this, or were you really just figuring all of this out on the fly?
I mean, it was all one of those things. You're like, this will never happen to us. This situation only happens to individuals where the child is abused, where the house is in disarray, and drinking and drugs and alcohol and the rest of it. So yeah, never thought for a second that this type of investigation would happen.
We had no idea what we were doing going into it and navigating through it. It was literally, God's hand, lots of prayers, and just having, Bryce is very intelligent in general, but having some common sense in the situation and knowing your rights and just being able to kind of stand for them, I think is the biggest thing. You know that you have some rights, and you can kind of execute those rights, and that's where we started, and we just did what we could throughout the process, and we had the guidance of our attorney, obviously. She was helpful in that regard in some circumstances, because without her, obviously, we wouldn't have known that they had some of the things they had to come, and we wouldn't have known that it was like crucial that we acted quickly and do something about it. So that's helpful.
So at what point in this, so this starts early 2021, at what point in this process did you decide we must leave Washington, we're going to leave Washington, and then at what point were you actually able to make that move happen?
Yeah, I mean, there was this situation, but I mean, both her and I were, employed with, good companies and the rest of it. It wasn't actually until I'll have to dance around this one a little bit, but basically, my previous employer enacted a COVID restricted policy that I didn't abide by, that I was terminated. Um, there's there's a whole other story behind that one. And then it was basically at that point I go, if we're going to leave, now's the time. Before I established myself with another business and the rest of it. So I took 6 months off, or I took 6 months off, and sparingly we went to Nashville and Charlotte and Dallas and did a good little trip around to find out, all right, if we're going to move, where are we going to move to? And then put it up in God's hands, put resumes out. And the South is a little bit of like, who do you know? So it's like, we just got to go somewhere. And we ended up landed in Dallas and found a house just before really interest rates started to go up, sold our house in Burien just before rates started to go up. So, as far as timing goes, it's been perfect. Now, there's no trees or tall trees. There's no mountains here. It's a very different facade than what's up in the Pacific Northwest. But I mean, the first week that we came down here, and I'll humble myself, it was Mother's Day weekend, and so we get up, we go out because we're going to start looking at houses and the rest of it. And the gentleman opens the door as our Harper's in my wife's hand. Says, "Happy Mother's Day." I'm like, oh crap. I'm not even the first one to say Happy Mother's Day. And she's just like, Southern hospitality is awesome. And
Yeah.
at the end of it, like, you weren't even the first one. I'm like, yep. So, and then the food's delicious down here. And then, you see American flags and, and there's no shortage of guns down here as well, too. So, you feel protected and insulated and the family values are here. So it's night and day different than being in enemy territory up in Seattle.
I mean, obviously, this instance with Harper was a very big push for us not to be in that state. We were this whole situation tainted our thoughts and views about being in a blue state for sure. I mean, we had already had very much conservative views to begin with, but that was a big push. But I mean, there's many other things done in Washington State that are just not in line with our values, and so it was already kind of in the pipeline. And when that happened, and then when what happened with this job, it was just a little guy like, this is it.
Yeah, it's if you're not listening, I'm gonna really listen. Get out now.
Yeah. And that's what I tell people, especially, a lot of people will say to me, well, you're a coward, so you fled and I'm going to stay here and fight. Like, it's this kind of virtue signaling thing. And, if people truly feel that God is calling them to stay and fight, that's great. We felt that God was calling us out. And kind of like you, God's hand was all over our exit and made everything, happen for us in his timing and in his way. I do believe if people are going to stay and fight and they have children, they need to understand these things that can happen to children. And your daughter was 4 months old. Our daughter was 14 years old. So there's different kinds of ways that your family can be impacted, and it doesn't matter what age your child is. So if you were, let's say you were still living in you're a parent, you're living in Washington, you have a young child, so you're making your visits to the pediatrician you're doing the well child visits, so you're going often. What are some things you think parents need to know or be guarded about in this? my kids are all over 18 now, so it was a very different time when I would take them to the pediatrician. If I were doing that now in a place like Washington, I'd probably be very different. Maybe wouldn't even go to a pediatrician. But what do you guys have any recommendations for people that are taking their children to the doctors in Washington or any other blue state for that matter?
I'll caveat it with this. Our pediatrician, our natural path pediatrician, not the one that we took her to do the other examination, but the one up in Seattle, actually was vindictive and tried to circumvent what she knew about us and our child, to try and make the Seattle Children's and DCYF argument stick more. So she actually worked against us, and that was a natural path up there. And I will comment below what that one is, and absolutely stay away from her. After the notes that I found that she wrote and her office wrote about it, did us no help. So don't think that going and trying to establish care with what you think is a good doctor. It is like, why? Well, one, why are you even taking them? You can weigh them, you can check their head circumference and height and the rest of it, all at home. You can go on the computer and check milestones and the rest of it. 9 times 10. Sorry. The only reason they want to get those kids into those appointments is to shoot them up with a bunch of vaccines. Like, this is your well child visit, 6 months. All right, 8 shots. Ready? Go. Like, well, what's the other point of it? Like, there is none.
Right.
I think in seeking out just anybody in any sort of in the medical field, I mean, some parents don't comfortable enough not doing that. Obviously, I feel a little bit different since I'm in the industry, but I would say to parents that aren't, like, you still need to know that, I mean, you're the you know best for your child. They went to school and they may have been trained in certain things, but ultimately, I mean, your gestalt and your gut instinct, and I mean, you know your child more than anyone. And so if you have concerns or you have reservations about what you're being told or what you think is the right next step for your child, I mean, just don't hesitate to stand your ground and be your own advocate. I mean, you have to be your own advocate, especially in a state like that, where, I mean, they will definitely, I mean, put you in one direction that fits their agenda that has nothing to do with your child. Like, in the end, like, as much as they're in the industry and they got into the industry maybe for the right reasons, I don't think that a lot of people and providers, especially in Western medicine now, are in it for the same reason they initially were. And I would say, I mean, part of the reason why I actually ended up becoming a PA, not an MD, is just because I was told by multiple MDs, like, medicine is not what it used to be. And it really is changed in a lot of ways. And so I think that there's a lot of bureaucracy and there's just like a lot of push to like get people in and just give them what they need, give them the vaccines, like give them the medicine and send them on their way. Like there's lost that kind of like care and compassion and want to actually do affect their child.
It's the same broken system, the school system, the medical system, education, and even our government at this point is broken. You fear government, there's a problem. And what our government's currently doing to allow agencies, your EPAs, your FDAs, your NIHs, these aren't elected officials, but they're somehow given this, like, well, I say we're given the same power to kind of implement. And I've said a couple times in voices here, that Chevron death case about a year and a half ago that was overturned, going to be paramount for the destruction of these agencies who think they have power over sovereign U.S. citizens. You don't. And that will be the downfall of a lot of these agencies. And I look forward to that. It's just going to, unfortunately, take time to go through the judicial process.
Yeah.
You have to wait for these agencies to pick the wrong family to mess with, which they did with us. That you're going to have it coming. You're going to be accountable for violating rights, over exercising what you think your laws are over us. It's just, it's going to take time.
And one of the things you and I were talking about yesterday on the phone is, you know, you and I both get calls from parents in primarily Washington that are in a crisis situation. And if the child has already been taken by CPS, or what the call I usually get is a teenager is in a mental hospital. And how do I get my kid out? How do I get my kid to a different state? The scary and sad thing is, once the child has been taken or is in, you know, a mental hospital or some kind of care of the state, it's really difficult, if not impossible, to help them, to get them out. And you know, you and I were talking a couple weeks ago about a family in Washington State who, a Christian conservative homeschooling family, their 3 children were taken by CPS, and someone reached out to me, and I reached out to you, Bryce, you know, because they're like, what do we do? How do we get our kids back? And, you know, it's really devastating to hear about that, because you just feel so helpless, because, you know, they're really at the mercy of the government. And so, you know, one of the reasons why I wanted you guys to, you know, do this video with me is because parents in Washington really need to understand, you are not fighting a fair system. And Bob Ferguson, Nick Brown, and all of these agencies in Washington will work against you. Especially, I believe conservative parents are definitely targeted. I mean, if not, why are they letting all these drug addicted, fentanyl abusing parents to keep their kids in their home? They don't take those kids away.
No.
Yeah, it's very true. I would 100% agree with that. That there is a population that's definitely being targeted, and I mean, this is only just one small aspect of it too. I mean, if you look at what they're indoctrinated into the school system, and the things that they're trying to do, and the rights that they're trying to take away from parents, and laws that they're trying to enact in Washington, I mean, all of it is totally just working against the parents in every single way. So, I mean, as much as, like you said, as much as you're willing to put up a fight, I mean, it's know that if you're going to be there and putting up the fight, I mean, it's going to be a consistent, long fight. I mean, they're not going to let down in any way. So,
and that fight will get you targeted, and that's ultimately the decision that I had to personally make. I don't mind. I'll fight. Like, I got to come at me. I dare you. But when you make a decision for your wife and for your kids, then it totally flips the script on how you want to fight. And so we thought, at least for us, I could fight better down here in Texas against particular things, knowing that there's some, you know, level of constitutional protection.
Yes,
with here, because the laws that they're enacting up there are so non-descriptive that they're just waiting for a CPS worker, social worker to read into what the law is. Because first it's just physical, like, all right, there's physical stuff wrong with the child. Well, now they're coming in with mental and social and economical issues and problems to where it's not descriptive. Like, how are you mentally abusing this kid? Well, you're not calling them by the right name. You know, you're not calling them by the right gender, or the right cat or horse, or, you know, whatever psychological item that, you know, a 12-year-old whose brain isn't even fully developed doesn't understand, like, the ramifications of what it is that they're doing. Like, no 12-year-old's gonna go, oh, they're gonna come take mommy and daddy home and they're gonna take you to jail. Like, ha ha. Like, no, that's not funny. But a 12-year-old doesn't grasp that. And the state has implemented individuals, and it's no knock on teachers, but you're not educated enough to be a mandatory reporter outside of on things. Physical abuse and bruises that look like there's issues. Yeah, everybody can see that. You're not a psychologist. You're not a mandatory reporter for these things. But you're in the school, and they go, you know, my name's Johnny, and the 12-year-old says, well, actually, I'm going to be sued today, and she's like, if she caters to the mentality, or in her mind she goes, oh crap, if I don't cater to this, I'm going to get fired. Okay, you're sued the rest of the day. Well, then
Yep.
Sue goes, mommy and daddy doesn't call me Sue at home. Well, all of a sudden that teacher goes, those Christian conservative parents that let their kids into the public school, hey, CPS,
Yep.
I got child abuse over here. They're not conforming to what the child's wishes are. Like, when does the child become the dominant person in the household? Like no. Like, you get guidelines from your parents. You get instructions and pathways forward and corrections that have to take place. Or the world's going to eat you alive. And now all of a sudden the kid gets to rule the household. Like, that's the direction it goes. So
Yeah.
now you got to kowtow to your kids and their demands at 12 years old, and it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and we actually had with not the daughter that, because so I have twins, and the one that was in the youth shelter, her twin sister was socially transitioned by her high school, and there were a few reports made to CPS that were screened out, but the fact that the school was calling CPS on like super minor things, like stepdad raised his voice asking the child to clean their room. Like, what parent does that? I mean, if I didn't clean my room, I got a board on my butt.
Small little PVC pipe when I was a kid.
Yeah. So I think, especially in, places like specifically Western Washington, these teachers and social workers and counselors in the schools are activists. They've come out of an education system that has indoctrinated them so that they're able to indoctrinate these kids. And these kids just don't, like you said, they just don't know enough. They don't know how to push back, and they can't defend their parents, or they think, it might be funny.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's very
kids
dangerous.
are inherently chaotic. I mean, scrambled brain. You're trying to get them in the right direction and piece everything together, and the brain's still developing. And then for the process to empower these kids to think that they have authoritative capacity over an adult, that's the mind-boggling part. Is, well, wait a second, they can't buy cigarettes until they're 18. They can't vote until they're 18.
Right.
They can't enlist in the military until they're 18. They can't drink until they're 21. But somehow making life-changing alterations on a bodily function and a mental function at 12, like, yep, we're okay with that. Because
Right.
why? It serves the narrative of them being able to either A, take the child out of the home, to increase the budgets of the CPS, which is wild. I mean, like,
Yeah, will you talk a little bit about how they do that, and why, there's that financial incentive for the state to remove kids from the homes?
Yeah. So why is CPS's budget every single year getting better and better? To me, that tells me you guys aren't doing your job. Like, you should be in the community. It was originally founded to do that, no different than the Department of Education and these other agencies, to do particular things. And the objective should be to complete them, not expand them and never let the issues go away. And so now they've become so expansive and so big that they have quotas. And you can go get 4 requests from the federal government that, based off of the submissions of how many kids they have, like, that's how much federal government aid they get. That's how much state aid that they get. So their objective is to get as many kids as they can, because it basically guarantees them job security. I mean, it's a horrible thing. Your job should be to educate, help families, make sure that the situation never happens, and inevitably go away, because we got better as a society, not worse. Like, your agency's depiction of getting bigger means our society's getting worse. Like, open your eyes.
Yeah. Something I want to circle back to, because you touched on it very quickly, and I want to make sure that people don't miss it because it's so important. You were arrested. You were taken to jail.
Yeah.
So they come to your home. That was all during this, when they came to your home and they've got you, they're wrestling you. And is this the time when they arrested you and hauled you off to jail?
Yeah, I was smiling and laughing the whole way, and Hillman goes, "You're pretty jovial for this," and I'm like, "I don't think you know who you're messing with."
And so, you go to jail. You're in jail, what, overnight, one night?
Yeah, overnight.
And then you go in front of a judge the next day, and what was their reason for arresting you?
They didn't have a good one. He kept asking that every single time before they even got in the car. Like,
Yeah.
why? Like, what?
I asked like multiple times. I'm like, why am I being detained? Like, again, you go back to this, like, am I being detained? Am I being arrested? Yes. Why? What are the charges? What is, like, you have to tell me why it is that I'm being detained and why I'm being arrested. Like, you can't just, under the guise of, safety, just put me in a
Right.
car, put me in jail, and then I get to find out later. So then I'm in front of the judge, and the judge is like, oh, custodial interference and a writ of habeas corpus, which means I'm not producing the body or giving information of how to produce the body, which, go figure, our laws can't humanize people. It's Harper. Like, I'm not telling you where Harper is. So then I get in front for 30 minutes. It's Detective Hillman, it's the CPS workers, it's the judge. And I got that recording, and I actually re-listened to it last night, and it's just like, I didn't perjure myself, didn't even have to use marital privilege, because our conversations between us, I don't have to tell the courts. It's called marital privilege. But
That's good to know.
Yeah. Now there's a caveat to it. If they think you have information and you're enacting marital privilege, and you're saying, I'm not telling you because it's marital privilege, they could go, you're withholding that information, and we're going to hold you in court, or we're going to hold you in jail. And I had never picked up on this until I re-listened to it last night. The judge goes, I actually have authority to hold you for coercive manners, which basically means she can hold me in court to basically blackmail my wife to come out of hiding. And even though I have no idea where she is. I have no idea where my child is. I can't give you that information, nor would I, even if I had it. And you're going to hold me against my will without bail. My bail was set to no bail. He is not allowed to leave. I'm not a murderer. I'm not a kidnapper. I'm not like a human trafficker. No bail. Like, you talk about constitutional violations here. Like, they lie under oath. I have them perjuring themselves multiple times, but no attorney will take the case because it's not financially beneficial to them.
Right.
Harper was never hurt through the whole process. So there's no financial gain for these attorneys to go after. And that was one of the hardest pills to swallow, was knowing that there are good attorneys out there, but they're very selective, and I will be on what cases they can and can't take based on the monetary financial compensation that kind of comes in. But there are tons of attorneys who know that I'm happy to stand in front of a judge against Detective Hillman and Detective Blakeman and present evidence that would relist them, making any of their arguments, any of their cases rendered useless. This is more just the hopes that if they watch this, they know I'm still watching them.
And what you mentioned about the lawyers is particularly important because, every time one of these unconstitutional laws gets passed in Washington, which 99% of their bills that they pass through the legislature are unconstitutional, and citizens will always say, it's okay, see you in court. And, it just, your point about lawyers not being able to find a lawyer to take your case, that is a big problem, because in a state like Washington, there's sort of this political career maneuvering in the court system, and a lawyer doesn't want to take a case that, number one, isn't going to be financially beneficial for them, but number two, might get them blackballed within the judicial system. So people in Washington and all these other blue states, they need to understand how corrupt the judicial system is and how difficult it is in these states to get a fair shot.
Yeah, it's, you find out how quickly it is a good old boys club and backdoor deals and conversations. I will say, not all cops are bad, obviously. Some are just claiming to do their job, which I would still chalk that up as you're bad. The two cops that took me in for my arraignment after arresting them, and then I inherently got released. They took me out of cuffs. Obviously they didn't deem me as a threat, so they took me out of the cuffs to walk me down to release me. But typically they're in cuffs on the release, and they're like, "Good job! Like, we hate them. Like, most of us hate CPS and TCF. Like, good job fighting back. Like, fight for your family." And they saw that, and then they felt the need to say something. And so we were talking and laughing, all the way back down to it. And I was just like, all right, that's a little reassuring that the two very large individuals that were standing behind me while I'm in, full shackles and bracelets, were like, good for you.
That's awesome. Yeah, they aren't all bad, but I think in a place like Washington, where especially with like Washington State Patrol is, Governor Ferguson is at the top of that, and a lot of these agencies have been captured by the left, and so they're not really doing the right thing. They're not protecting a citizen's right, and which was all over your case. Do you have, I kind of want to wrap this up, but I want people to be prepared. And that's one of the reasons why, I bring this type of content to people, because I want them to have an awareness of what's going on and how they can be prepared and protect their family. Knowing what you know now, if you were someone still living in Washington, I know, we already kind of talked about, do as much of this well baby stuff at home with your kid, really trying to empower parents that you are qualified to do a lot of these things that you think that you need to outsource to people. But as far as is there a way that parents could be prepared for such a situation? Like you mentioned, a bug out bag and, some of that, like, are there preparation things people could be doing?
Have a burner phone.
Yeah.
Multiple burner phones. And when you buy the burner phone, buy with cash. That's the reason they want to get rid of cash, is because it's a lot easier to track with that. So Faraday bag. So if you need to take your laptop because it's got documentation or information associated with it, or your cell phone, don't think for a second that just because you turn your phone off, it's there. Right. She shut her phone off. And through this whole process, I have a detective buddy that I was in communication with. He's like, "Nah, it's it." And so it got shut off, shoved into a Faraday bag, and then just left where they weren't. Because if they want to be able to track it, they can still track it. He was astonished through this whole process of just. He's like, "Wow, I cannot believe they're escalating it to this point." He's like, "This is wild to me." Those types of things in preparation. So that's not just any situation that you may think that you need to get out of and get there, and water and everything else. It's extremely difficult to kind of make a decision, because if your child is injured, like you should do that. Like, if there's a broken bone, like, you can't do that at the house. Like, you do need to take them in,
Right.
but you need to make sure that your story, and again, the truthful story. I'm not trying to, help individuals that do abuse their children. But your story needs to be very well thought out, and you need to be prepared to get second or third opinion associated with things. And the second that you think that this narrative is going to start to be flipped away up against you, like, you need to be prepared to take your child and run. And I mean run. And be prepared. So this is the other one. There are licensed readers on every major highway. And so they will track your car. So if you need to get a different car, somehow get a different car, or remove your plates. Now, removing your plates makes you a little bit more of a, hey, why doesn't this person have plates? I'm gonna pull them over. But whatever you can do. And then getting out of the state is huge, because it slows their capacity to be able to get, because Washington State has no authority of individuals who are in Oregon. Now they'll claim that they have sovereign authority over Washington state residents. So kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, is a Texas resident who's up in Washington who may have this happen to them. This is what I'm waiting for the court to finally see through, is if the state of Washington takes a child that's not a resident of Washington, at that point, in my opinion, that's kidnapping.
Mhm.
And wait for them to mess with the wrong parents, and Texas starts to thwart their authority over the state of Washington, or any other state that has common sense, in that sense of things. So it's very difficult to say this is what you would do in every situation, but prep yourself, understand, your rights, your constitution, have a bug out back, have a plan. And enough people have come to me through other avenues, that I'm more than happy to get a brief of what your situation is, and then make some judgment calls on how I would help and handle. Obviously, for those that are listening, with complete and utter plausible deniability, so you can't do anything to me. But I'll make sure that family is kept safe in some form or capacity. So
I'd also say
reach out.
just plan to know who you're going to reach out to. That is your support system and your network of people you can trust. Because if you don't have the support system and you don't have other people that you can 100% trust, I mean, it's going to be difficult to try and do it on your own. So I would say know that that's the case, and always know who your go-to person is that you're going to call to reach somebody if you want something, and that they can and will and act on your behalf without question. Because throughout this whole process, we never even touched on it, but I came to learn that there are some people in my inner circle that I couldn't trust that actually turned against me as well too during this whole time. And so
Carrie Nastasi of Thurston County Sheriff's Department, I got your information.
Anyway, so somebody I personally went to school with, she actually is a sheriff.
Wow.
This whole situation went against us. A personal friend of mine, we're not saying names, also went against us, called the police, and was concerned more so on my behalf that something happened to me, but in doing so, escalated and made the situation worse. And so just knowing the people that you know you can fully trust 100% that are willing to kind of go out on a limb with you to help you. I would say definitely have that for sure.
Yeah, that inner circle was absolutely paramount. And again, with us, it's church, and
Yeah.
second, that they know that you're good people, they've been around you. I mean, these are people that wrote testimonies in our case against this, that were just like, this is completely and utterly false. I mean, my wife had a natural birth because of not wanting to inject things into our child, to not have her in this stressful situation of all the lights and being in the hospital for 2-3 days in a row, them taking the child away, waking her up. Like, we were in and out in 4 hours with the center, and no drugs, no nothing. And to take that, a written statement from the what's the technical title? Where's the birthing person? Midwife.
Midwife.
Yeah, and to take that and all of our friends' statements that, we're just going to throw these out. Like, that's the information that they didn't even look at through this process. So, I mean, don't think compiling a bunch of awesome things is going to help. Just have your inner circle help you, get out.
Get out. Yeah. And I think that's kind of a perfect place to end, because I think that's the message that we all share, right? Is get out, because as LaToya, you said, a few moments ago, it's going to be a long process to get Washington back to any kind of sanity. It's so far in the hole. I believe it's beyond redeeming right now. I think it's going to have to totally collapse and then, be rebuilt. But I don't know if that will happen in our lifetime. And if you have children, or, you just want to live like free people. Like I said, our kids are all over 18 now, but we want to be able to go to the gun store and, pick up a 17 round magazine if we want, you know.
I'll ship them to you.
She's good now.
Not you, but anybody in Washington. There's no laws that says I can't ship them to you.
That's true. Yeah. But but that is the, you know, especially if you have children, you need to get out of Washington. It's not going to get better. And, you know, as we kind of alluded to, if your child is a resident of a different state, Texas, Florida, Tennessee, whatever, and they are, you know, kidnapped, yeah, you know, or transgender trafficking, because that's kind of a thing that Washington is really trying to increase, and bringing kids to their state for the transgender stuff. If you're in a different state like Texas, then the state of Texas can help you protect your child from these other states. So yes, please get out. I want to encourage people to leave your comments and questions below this video, because Bryce and LaToya are willing to come back and have more conversations about this. And we can, you know, we kind of kept this as more of an overview of your story and what happened, but we can definitely go down into, you know, different details and different paths about this, depending on, you know, the questions people have. So please do leave questions that you might have for the Richards or for me, and we'll, you know, come back and try to answer those and address those things, so that, you know, our goal and, you know, our shared goal is to help you protect your family and help you protect your children. So I so appreciate you guys taking the time to do this. I know you're really good about sharing your story in hopes that it will help other parents be able to protect their kids. And I know there's a sort of trauma that goes into the retelling of the story. And so I appreciate you being willing to go through the emotions that come with telling your story.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I think they didn't think when they came after our family is they generally emotionally drain you, financially drain you, spiritually drain you through these processes. That it makes for a lot of families, you know, months, years past, or even in the fight right then, to come out and tell their story, or they fear retaliation for telling their story. And obviously that's something that, like, you know, now being in Texas was part of the reason we moved here, was because we feared retaliation for coming out and speaking about these particular things. And so, you know, I hope we help speak for those individuals that, you know, don't feel as empowered or financially and emotionally drained to come out and tell their story. But there are a lot of us out there.
Yep.
They're just they're tired and they don't want to talk more about it.
Yeah, it's sadly more common than people realize, and with the laws that continue to pass in these blue states, it's going to become more and more common, and everybody will know somebody that is impacted by something like this. Well, thank you guys, and we will bring you back, I'm sure, to talk about more things and more details along these lines, and won't necessarily have to dig into the details of your story and how that impacted you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you reaching out.